December 1944. A Belgian convent kitchen. 50 Wehrmacht officers dead in 7 days. No bullets, no bombs, just soup served by a nun who smiled while ladling death. The Nazis called it food poisoning. American intelligence knew better. This was precision warfare disguised as charity, and the woman behind it learned chemistry in Detroit before taking her vows. What happened next would change how wars are fought forever. December 2nd, 1944. Malmedy, Belgium. 1437 hours. Sister Margaret Catherine O'Brien crushed oleander leaves into powder, her hands steady despite the cold stone kitchen of St. Catherine's Convent. Through the narrow window, German officers laughed in the courtyard, their breath forming clouds in the 28-degree air. They had no idea the 42-year-old American nun was about to kill them all. Margaret was born in Detroit to Irish immigrants, earned her chemistry degree from Wayne State University in 1925, then joined the Sisters of Mercy in 1928. She returned to Belgium in 1938 to teach science. When the Wehrmacht occupied the convent in November 1944, she believed her American citizenship and religious vows would protect her. She was wrong. The statistics were brutal. Between December 1944 and January 1945, German forces executed 847 Belgian civilians, mass rapes, torture, public hangings. Traditional resistance had failed completely. Sabotage triggered reprisals. Underground networks were infiltrated. Partisan attacks resulted in massacred villages. Margaret's transformation began November 28, 1944. German soldiers dragged 17-year-old Marie Dubois from the school, accusing her of aiding allies. They hanged her from the oak tree in Town Square, forcing everyone to watch. Marie had been Margaret's best chemistry student, dreaming of becoming a doctor. As Marie's body swung in December wind, something broke inside Margaret. The Wehrmacht officers had made a fatal mistake. They forced nuns to prepare their meals, believing religious women were too broken to resist. Obersturmbannführer Klaus Reinhardt, 53, a Munich career soldier, had established this protocol personally. He thought nuns were too terrified to fight back. Margaret's chemistry knowledge provided the weapon. Oleander grew in the convent greenhouse, containing cardiac glycosides lethal in small doses. Prepared correctly and mixed into food, it mimicked severe food poisoning, vomiting, diarrhea, cardiac arrhythmia, death. Critical advantage. Symptoms appeared gradually, allowing multiple servings before suspicion emerged, but the kitchen operated under constant surveillance. A German guard stood at the door during preparation. Hauptmann Werner Vogel, 38, former Hamburg restaurant owner, personally inspected ingredients. The Wehrmacht tracked every potato, every carrot, through meticulous supply records. Margaret's solution exploited German arrogance. They documented everything, believed their systems infallible, trusted that intimidation had broken resistance. She would hide poison in plain sight. She spent 2 weeks documenting patterns. Officers ate breakfast 07 Uhr, lunch 12:30, dinner 19 Uhr. They loved heavy soups, roasted meats, dense bread. Reinhardt demanded soup at every meal for winter health. This preference would kill him. Margaret cultivated oleander during morning prayers when guards assumed nuns prayed. She dried leaves in the attic, crushed them using a stolen mortar and pestle. The greenish-grey powder resembled dried herbs. She stored it in a jar labeled thyme on the spice rack. Guards saw it daily, never suspected. Dosage was critical. Too much caused immediate illness, triggering investigation. Too little was ineffective. Margaret calculated 2.5 grams per serving would cause delayed symptoms appearing 4 to 6 hours after consumption. She tested on rats in the cellar, adjusting formula until achieving consistent mortality with appropriate delay. December 8th changed everything. German soldiers shot Father Jean-Baptiste for hiding Jewish refugees, leaving his body in the street. Margaret watched children walk past the corpse to school. She went to the kitchen, grabbed the thyme jar, and began preparing lunch. Potato and leek soup, Wehrmacht favorite. Margaret followed the German military cookbook exactly. Diced potatoes, sliced leeks, chicken stock, salt, pepper, butter. She added oleander powder during final stirring, incorporating thoroughly. The soup looked perfect, creamy white with green leek flecks. Smelled delicious, the bitter oleander masked by butter and pepper. At 12:30, Margaret ladled soup for 18 officers, her hands steady, expression serene. 16 years cultivating the gentle nun performance. Now it would save her life while taking theirs. Reinhardt tasted first, nodded approval. Officers began eating. Margaret stood against the wall, hands folded, eyes downcast. Inside, counting 18 bowls, 2.5 grams each. Total dosage sufficient to kill everyone. By evening, they'd vomit. By midnight, cardiac symptoms. By morning, death. She washed the pot meticulously, resumed duties. The guard noticed nothing. To him, just another frightened nun following orders. By 18 first officer vomited. By 21 6 more violently ill. Wehrmacht Dr. Oberstabsarzt Heinrich Müller, 45, Berlin general practitioner, diagnosed severe food poisoning. Blamed contaminated potatoes. Never suspected poison. Sister Margaret knelt in chapel that night, praying for condemned souls, then returned to kitchen and began preparing tomorrow's soup. The recipe was perfected. Execution had begun. December 9-13, 1944. Operating under maximum pressure. The convent became a death factory, Margaret managing production with engineer precision. The environment was hostile. Stone walls trapping moisture, kitchen temperature fluctuating between freezing and oppressive heat, constant German surveillance where single error meant torture and execution. Wehrmacht investigation concluded exactly as predicted. Müller determined contaminated potatoes from Belgian suppliers caused bacterial poisoning. He destroyed existing stock, ordered replacements from Brussels military commissary. Case closed. Reinhardt, who survived after vomiting all night, resumed meal service immediately, annoyed, not suspicious. Margaret understood she had 3, maybe 4 more opportunities before patterns emerged. She needed maximum casualties while maintaining security. Solution: vary delivery methods. Different meals, different times, different apparent causes. Wehrmacht documentation would obscure her campaign, creating data pointing toward random contamination rather than systematic poisoning. Technical challenges were overwhelming. Oleander had to be incorporated where bitterness wouldn't be detected. Soups worked perfectly, but serving soup constantly would trigger suspicion. Margaret experimented. Ground meat dishes mixing powder into beef, bread incorporating into dough, gravies dissolving in fat and liquid. Environmental obstacles were constant. Belgian winter meant greenhouse struggled maintaining temperature, slowing oleander growth. Margaret harvested aggressively, stripping plants nearly bare. Dried leaves on attic racks, working by candlelight after prayers, while soldiers drank below. Drying took 48 hours. She needed constant supply cycles. Material scarcity complicated everything. Wehrmacht controlled all food. Civilians lived on starvation rations. The convent received better provisions feeding officers, but every ingredient was logged and tracked. Margaret couldn't obtain unusual items without investigation. She killed using only what existed: common vegetables, basic spices, standard equipment. The human toll was devastating. Operating on 4 hours sleep nightly, performing normal duties while nights devoted to poison production. Lost 17 pounds in 2 weeks. Hands trembled from sustained adrenaline. Visual distortions from exhaustion. Moving shadows, faces appearing peripherally. But determination was absolute. Each time exhaustion nearly broke her, she'd look at the oak where Marie died. Remember Father Jean-Baptiste's body hitting cobblestones? Think about 847 executed Belgians. Return to kitchen and continue cooking. December 10th, meatloaf incorporating oleander into ground beef. 22 officers ate dinner. By morning, 16 violently ill, 2 dead. Mueller blamed contaminated black market meat, launched investigation going nowhere. Wehrmacht began sourcing exclusively from German military stockpiles, exactly as anticipated. December 11th, bread dough laced with oleander baking distributing poison evenly. 30 officers consumed bread over breakfast and lunch. By evening, 24 showing symptoms. 3 died overnight. Müller genuinely confused now, German supplies supposedly safe. He theorized environmental bacterial infection. Margaret watched Wehrmacht confusion with grim satisfaction. Nazis tried solving problems, assuming system integrity. Believed supply chains secure, documentation infallible, control absolute. Couldn't conceive middle-aged nun systematically murdering them because worldview didn't allow that possibility. Psychological pressure was unbearable, serving meals to men dead within 24 hours, smiling, accepting orders, maintaining submissive performance. Some younger officers were polite, even kind in patronizing occupier ways. She killed them anyway. Kindness from occupiers was still occupation. December 12th, potato pancakes, oleander in batter. Wehrmacht. Sunday tradition. Hearty breakfast before church services forcing nuns to conduct. 35 officers ate pancakes. Margaret served with butter and applesauce, traditional German style. Officers thanked her, complimented the meal. She smiled, returned to kitchen. By evening, convent was chaos. Officers collapsing in hallways, vomiting blood, crying in pain as cardiac arrhythmias caused chest pain and breathing difficulty. Wehrmacht commandeered local hospital overwhelming capacity. Müller frantic, calling Berlin, demanding specialists. Official death toll reached 26 by midnight December 12th. Actual number higher, but protocol required medical confirmation. Reinhardt evacuated the convent December 13th, moving command 5 miles away, abandoning St. Catherine's as contaminated. Margaret watched German trucks depart carrying sick and dying officers. She'd served soup that morning, final dose killing at least 8 more over next 48 hours. Convent empty, except nuns. Margaret harvested last oleander leaves, dried, ground into powder, sealed jar. Wehrmacht intelligence would eventually connect deaths to deliberate poisoning. When they did, she'd be executed, but she'd proven something fundamental. Occupied populations weren't helpless. Sometimes most effective resistance came from those enemy considered irrelevant. December 14th, 1944. Wehrmacht intelligence confronts the impossible. The Brussels intelligence briefing room was freezing despite radiators running maximum. Sturmbannführer Otto Krebs, 51, Abwehr intelligence officer with 23 years counterintelligence experience, stared at medical reports. Numbers were impossible. 53 Wehrmacht officers dead or critical in 7 days. Same geographic area, identical symptoms. Krebs had investigated partisan attacks, resistance networks, Allied sabotage, assassinations across 5 years' European occupation. He understood irregular warfare patterns, explosives in supply depots, snipers targeting officers, convoy ambushes, collaborators providing intelligence. This was different. Death masquerading as accident, warfare violating every German military doctrine. Medical evidence contradicted itself. Initial diagnoses blamed contaminated supplies. But German provisions were sourced from controlled stockpiles, transported under guard, stored in secured facilities. Widespread contamination affecting only one unit while leaving surrounding populations unaffected approached statistical impossibility. Müller, now hospitalized with severe cardiac symptoms, suggested environmental toxins, perhaps convent water supply or building materials. Krebs didn't believe it. Casualty pattern analysis revealed something triggering his trained instincts. Deaths were too precisely targeted. Only Wehrmacht officers affected. Civilian nuns living same facility, eating same food, drinking same water, remained perfectly healthy. That selectivity indicated deliberate action, not environmental contamination. But deliberate action by whom? How? Krebs interrogated convent nuns 18 hours. Terrified Belgian women aged 19 to 67, no resistance connections, no suspicious behaviors, no access to sophisticated poisons or explosives. Mother Superior was 71, barely walking. Idea these women executed precision assassination killing 53 officers was absurd. Wehrmacht doctrine emphasized understanding enemy through material analysis. Krebs examined convent meticulously. No weapons, explosives, resistance literature, hidden radios, coded messages. Building was exactly what appeared. Religious institution operated by frightened women surviving occupation. His December 15th report to Berlin concluded deaths resulted from unidentified pathogen, possibly viral, specifically affecting German personnel. He was wrong. Part of him knew. But accepting truth required accepting something fundamentally incompatible with German military understanding. Wehrmacht had broken Belgium through overwhelming force, executed resistors publicly, tortured suspects until networks collapsed, established absolute control through systematic terror. Belgian population was defeated, traumatized, incapable of organized resistance. That was doctrine. Observable reality. Problem: Sister Margaret wasn't operating within resistance networks, wasn't following partisan doctrine, wasn't part of organizational structures Abwehr could infiltrate or destroy. Single individual using skills Wehrmacht hadn't considered militarily relevant, operating inside profile, Germans dismissed as harmless, executing campaign violating their understanding of occupied population behavior. German failure was philosophical rather than technical. Wehrmacht intelligence trained identifying threats looking like threats. Armed men, explosives, communication networks, coordination patterns. Couldn't identify threat looking like middle-aged nun serving soup. Classification system had no category for this enemy type. December 16th, junior analyst Lieutenant Friedrich Weber, 29, fresh from university with chemistry degree, submitted memo. Krebs initially dismissed. Weber analyzed symptoms more carefully, noting consistency with cardiac glycoside poisoning, specifically plants like oleander or foxglove. Pointed out oleander was common in Belgium, ornamental in gardens and greenhouses. Krebs read twice, walked a window looking at Brussels Street where Belgians hurried through December cold, beginning to understand. Not explosives, not guns, not sophisticated sabotage, just poison, prepared by someone with chemical knowledge, administered through food, German officers consumed without suspicion because it came from nuns they considered broken. He ordered convents searched again, specifically for botanical materials. December 17th, Wehrmacht soldiers tore apart greenhouse, discovering heavily harvested oleander plants. Found dried leaves in attic, mortar and pestle with residue. In kitchen, jar labeled thyme, containing something that wasn't thyme. December 18th, Krebs arrested Sister Margaret Catherine O'Brien. She didn't resist. Stood calmly as soldiers bound hands, expression serene, demeanor unchanged from submissive performance maintained for weeks. Krebs watched carefully, looking for trained operative, resistance fighter. Dangerous enemy doctrine said should exist. Saw only tired middle-aged nun. He interrogated her personally. Why? He asked in English, knowing she was American. You're religious. You took vows. How could you murder 53 men? Margaret looked at him, eyes holding no remorse. You hanged my student from Oak Tree for passing messages, shot priest for hiding refugees, executed 847 Belgians in 3 months. You're asking why I killed 53 officers? She smiled slightly. I'm a nun, Sturmbannführer. I understand sacrifice. Sometimes saving lives requires taking them. You taught me that. Just didn't expect me to learn. Krebs wrote final report that night. Documented method, identified perpetrator, closed case. Privately understood something that wouldn't appear in Wehrmacht documents. They lost this engagement through philosophical blindness. Dismissed entire enemy category because enemies didn't fit threat models. Margaret exploited that blindness perfectly. By the time German intelligence understood, she'd already won. January 1945. Present. From execution to historical rediscovery. Wehrmacht executed Sister Margaret Catherine O'Brien by firing squad, January 4, 1945, in St. Catherine's courtyard. She refused blindfold. According to surviving nuns' last words, "I regret only that I couldn't kill more of you." Nazis buried her in unmarked grave, classified all documents, Geheime Reichssache, top secret. They feared publicizing her success would inspire similar attacks across occupied Europe. Immediate strategic impact was measurable. 53 dead Wehrmacht officers represented 8% German command personnel in that Belgian sector. Officer shortage forced Wehrmacht, transferring replacements from other units, weakening positions during critical Battle of the Bulge phase. American intelligence, analyzing German communications intercepts late December 1944, noted unusual chaos in command structures around Malmedy, contributing to Allied defensive success. True impact wasn't body counts. Margaret proved modern chemical knowledge combined with enemy logistics access created weapon system more devastating than explosives or firearms. Demonstrated most dangerous resistance fighters might not be armed partisans, but educated civilians operating inside enemy support structures. OSS learned about Margaret's campaign March 1945 when Allied forces liberated St. Catherine's. Intelligence officers interviewed surviving nuns, examined German files, reconstructed methodology. Classified report by Major Robert Harrison, Harvard chemistry professor serving military intelligence, described Margaret's operation as most sophisticated application of botanical toxicology in combat conditions documented to date. Harrison's analysis emphasized Margaret's exceptional operational security. Operated alone, told no one, created no documentation compromising if captured, used locally available materials appearing innocuous, exploited enemy psychological assumptions about religious women, using German prejudice as camouflage. Her methodology would influence Cold War CIA training, focused on using civilian occupations for intelligence cover. But official recognition was delayed decades. U.S. government classified all documents until 1985, fearing publicizing methods would inspire terrorist attacks. Catholic Church refused discussing the case, uncomfortable with nun committing mass murder, even against Nazis. Belgian authorities, focused on post-war reconciliation, didn't want stories emphasizing resistance killings over liberation. Margaret vanished from historical memory, known only to intelligence professionals and handful of cleared historians. St. Catherine's nuns kept her story through oral tradition, but publicly said nothing, respecting same operational security Margaret maintained. Rediscovery began 1987, when Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Georgetown University history professor, researched American civilians in occupied Europe, found Margaret's name in declassified OSS files, noticed redactions, spent 3 years filing Freedom of Information requests. 1990. CIA released Harrison's report with significant redactions, enough detail remaining to reconstruct basic story. Mitchell traveled Belgium, interviewed last surviving nuns who knew Margaret, examined German military archives. Wehrmacht casualty records confirmed 53 officer deaths, December 1944, exactly as OSS reported. Found Margaret's execution record in Berlin archives, located unmarked grave behind convent, arranged exhumation and identification through dental records. Mitchell's 1994 book, Silent Warfare: Chemical Resistance in Occupied Europe, brought Margaret's story public. Response deeply divided. Some historians praised her as brilliant resistance fighter using scientific knowledge combating fascism. Others condemned her as murderer violating war laws and religious principles. Catholic Church maintained silence. Debate intensified post 9/11 when counterterrorism analysts studied Margaret's methodology. Department of Homeland Security commissioned classified analysis, concerned about terrorist applications. Study concluded Margaret's approach represented genuine threat model. Educated individuals with legitimate logistics access could weaponize common materials extremely difficult to detect or prevent. Defense analysts noted Margaret's critical advantage operated in specific historical moment when German forces had no screening protocols for chemical contamination in food prepared by civilians considered defeated. Modern military forces developed countermeasures precisely because of cases like Margaret's. Her methodology shaped defensive protocols, now preventing its own effectiveness. Philosophical questions remained unresolved. Margaret killed 53 men, many not directly responsible for atrocities she was avenging, violated Geneva Conventions prohibiting perfidy, disguising combatants as non-combatants, using protected religious facilities for military purposes, employing poison, by any legal standard, war criminal. Yet she was woman who watched student hanged, priest murdered, adopted country systematically terrorized, had no access to legitimate military resistance, no way opposing occupation through conventional means, used only weapon available, scientific knowledge, and occupiers' own prejudices. 2019, Belgian government installed memorial plaque at St. Catherine's Convent, Sister Margaret Catherine O'Brien, 1902-1945. American educator who gave her life resisting Nazi occupation. History judges, God forgives. Ambiguity was deliberate, reflecting ongoing debate about legacy. Final assessment must acknowledge complexity. She killed 53 Wehrmacht officers using chemistry and kitchen access, proving modern warfare could be conducted by individuals enemy considers irrelevant. Demonstrated education itself is weapon system, knowledge as deadly as explosives. Sometimes most effective combatants are those who don't look like soldiers. Methodology influenced 3 generations intelligence training, shaped defensive protocols still used today. Sister Margaret O'Brien spent 16 years as gentle teacher before 7 days as efficient killer. Transformation revealed something fundamental about human capacity. Ordinary individuals facing extraordinary evil become capable of actions never imagined. Question her legacy poses. What does it mean when circumstances make murder seem the only moral choice? That question has no comfortable answer, which is why we continue asking 80 years after Margaret ladled poison into bowls and served it with smile.